At a certain point, I think every shonen series will have to deal with the issue of its supporting cast. As the story continues to grow, it's only natural to add more characters. It keeps things interesting and introduces entirely new dynamics and arcs to the narrative. New friendships and rivalries are forged, and it's fun to see all the new interactions in the process. But what happens to those who aren't always in the spotlight? People who are there to fill in the background and occasionally remind us that they too exist in this story. The side characters. How do you keep them relevant and interesting in their own rights while not wandering too far away from the narrative focal point that is the main character? Well, there are a number of ways. Like Schrödinger said, after all, there's more than one way to skin a cat. Maybe? And one series that I think employs a number of these strategies quite well is Boku no Hero Academia, because I love just about every supporting character this show has to offer. From the teachers to Class 1B to even the villains, despite however much development there has been, I find the vast majority of them incredibly likable in one way or another. And in my book at least, that's a sign you're doing something right. So let's explore just how HeroAca does this. So right away, one thing that aids not only HeroAca, but many other shonen series is the high school setting. As derivative as it may be, it's a place that, at the very least, allows for people of all kinds to regularly be in contact with one another without making scenes seem bloated. And really, a high school is, I think, just a more specific version of a bigger umbrella idea that is establishing a group within your story. Because if you look at most shonen series set outside school, you'll still see this dynamic present. The Straw Hats from One Piece, the Survey Corps from Attack on Titan, Libra from Kekai Sensen, hell, even Black Clover by having their Magic Knight squads understands the narrative importance. And thinking about it, nothing in the high school setting prevents smaller subgroups from forming. Be it Class 1A or 1B in HeroAca, the Polar Star Dorm in Shokugeki, or literally any team in a sports anime. The establishment of groups facilitates the formation of dynamics between characters within said group, because these parties are often given a common goal or enemy, be they short or long term, to strive for or fight against. This method of sectioning off can be an effective way of characterizing those who maybe haven't had as much screen time or development, especially if they are placed near a main character. So enters Boku no Hero Academia, a series that takes nearly every opportunity it can to group up or pair off its characters. So far through 47 episodes, we've had Class 1A partitioned during their first combat training, the attack on the USJ, the sports festival, final exams, the test of courage, and most recently during the Bakugo rescue arc. Each instance had unique goals and characters grouped up differently. Thus, we were able to get better acquainted with several side characters by the end of just the first season. Granted, one of them was Mineta, but still. Through this method, most of Class 1A received at least some level of development and characterization to the point where you could at least ascribe some personality trait to them. And I'm not strictly talking about characters like Aoyama or Koda here, because while it may feel like they're more important in Season 1, I'd argue that in terms of depth, Uraraka and Ida are also very much side characters. They feel like they aren't because of their proximity to Deku in the first season, but for the most part, neither one really receives much development until Season 2. I mean, as much as I love Uraraka, her personality in the first 13 episodes is basically just that of a bubbly girl. And Ida is just your typical honor roll student. We learn maybe one or two facts about them, which yes is more than a lot of Class A, but when you compare it to the likes of Deku and Bakugo, you can see where the narrative focus was for most of the first season. But this lack of initial development is, in my opinion, actually an asset for HeroAca as opposed to a hindrance. Because by keeping most of the side characters on relatively the same level in terms of growth, it doesn't then feel jarring whenever the spotlight is shifted onto them. They're a part of the story after all, but it doesn't feel as though certain characters are pre-selected for development later on. Currently, the best example of this happening in the series is Todoroki. We knew next to nothing about him going into the sports festival other than that he had a strong quirk and got into UA via recommendation. Based on that, I wasn't really expecting the incredible amount of development he got in Season 2, certainly not to the point where he's basically a main character now. It's a feat that's especially impressive when you consider that in Season 1 he only had 24 lines. Yes, I went back and counted. I have a problem. But this also happens to a lesser extent in the second season with characters like Tokoyami and Yaoyorozu, where their simplistic characterization gets highlighted and eventually fleshed out in later arcs. And building on that point, I think this series handles character development and growth in a very realistic way. It's never a situation where a character is suddenly changed or different after their moment in the sun. This is again most apparent with Todoroki when he refuses to use his fire against Ida or Bakugo after doing so in his fight with Deku. But we also see it with Ochako and Momo. Both characters suffered defeats in the sports festival that sparked their desire to better themselves. Ochako mainly focused on combat during her internship and has since been able to apply it in multiple instances, one of which involved Toga trying to actually kill her. Likewise, Momo, while not learning as much from her internship, was still able to grow during her final exam, where Todoroki then acted as a foil. She was then given an opportunity to apply her reclaimed confidence in her decision-making when she chooses to make a tracker for the retreating Nomu. A small, split-second idea that was the entire reason Deku and Co could even attempt to rescue Bakugo. Characters are like Legos. You don't build a set all at once. You add to them brick by brick until you're happy with what you've made. And if you've done it right, there's always room to add more. None of these examples represent a tremendous amount of development. But that's the point. Small bits are added that are then shown rather than told, because massive changes just don't happen overnight, and plenty is still in store for Ochako, Momo, and everybody else. Speaking of which, not to spoil anything from the manga, but to further illustrate my point, what happened with Todoroki is going to happen to another character as well, where they get developed to the point of basically feeling like a main character. And so the same could happen to any of the supporting cast. I mean, not Mineta, because come on, but you get the idea. The possibility that it could makes it feel like all the other side characters are still interesting and rich when it comes to their backstory and motivation, we just haven't gotten a chance to hear it yet. And so their simple but strong personalities can still shine because thanks to their classmates, it feels like this is just a piece of their character rather than the whole picture. It makes their passionate one-note characterization seem far more fun and enjoyable as opposed to lazy or contrived. But this isn't limited to just Class 1A, I think it can also apply to the teachers and Class 1B. Both groups, despite or maybe because of less screen time, commit to their personality shticks just as much as Class 1A. And I want to highlight a couple of instances where this tactic succeeds in making two characters likable where they might otherwise come off as boring or annoying. The first is Mr. Aizawa, Class 1A's homeroom teacher. He's a perpetually tired and strict guy who comes off as not very fun-loving. After his introduction, you would think he has it out for Deku, and yet it's clear he cares very much for all of his students in his own way. And over time, you do grow to love his dry and maybe slightly sadistic sense of humor. But in going back and rewatching the first season, there's an interaction now that just puts the dumbest smile on my face for an unintended reason. It comes when Mr. Aizawa is first introduced. Deku, Ochako, and Ida all look out into the hallway to see their new teacher bundled up in a sleeping bag. Their reactions get a laugh, sure, but think about the situation for a second, because only one of a few possible scenarios exists. 1. Mr. Aizawa inchwormed his way there in his sleeping bag. 2. He got to the classroom, decided to lay down and pack himself up to surprise his students. Or 3. He somehow managed to convince another teacher to drag him into position. Any one of these options is hilarious to consider because they're so different from how Mr. Aizawa presents himself. The opposite situation, where a small detail bolsters a character's personality trait, comes to us in the form of Monoma, the guy with all the braggadocious, condescending habits of Bakugo, just without any shred of charisma. Not saying that Bakugo is the king of charm or anything, but next to Monoma, he might as well be. This snobby and just plain extra aura he exerts is best reinforced in the scene where Deku and company are discussing what the final exams will entail. Monoma, being the right ass that he is, intentionally bumps Deku's head before karma soon strikes in the form of Kendo, the, scientifically speaking, third best girl in the show. What? She'd be number 2 if I was more into fisting. Anyway, there is literally no attention paid to it by anyone in the show, but we get a glimpse of Monoma's lunch. And the bit I want to highlight is what he's drinking. Because again, only a few possibilities exist. And either the drinking age has been lowered in this futuristic superhuman society and he's having wine, or it's sparkling grape juice. No other alternatives exist, and I'm inclined to believe it's the latter because he is that freaking extra. I can't get over it, because it helps make Monoma, who should by all accounts be hated, somehow still lovable in his own socially inept way. And this extends to the vast majority of characters within this world, making their interactions, big or small, entertaining in their own right. They commit to the point where they come off as genuine, like they couldn't keep up the act for this long if it wasn't just part of who they are. It may seem a little odd, but I can't think of many other reasons as to why I find the majority of this cast lovable and awesome. There aren't a lot of series I can say that about, so I consider it a real achievement on the part of the show. But what do you think? Do you have a different reason for why these side characters are so appealing? Or maybe you completely disagree and utterly despise every single one of them. In which case, why are you even watching this video? Why did you stay till the end here? Also, do you just hate fun? But whatever your thoughts are, you can let me know down below. As always though, thank you for watching, and an especially big thanks goes out to my awesome patrons, PenguinPandaZero, OverjoyedSoup, MVPino, James Morton, Mr. Idealist, Marbled Ranger, and everyone else for generously supporting me. If you would like to join those awesome people, you can click on the right to visit my Patreon page, click the left to subscribe, and that bell icon might soon be useless, so click it while you can. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time.